Buenos dias, buongiorno. Io sono Barone Antonio Giordano, Maestro. In terms of this presentation, this is a survey of Sephardic music, the Ladino songs of medieval Spain. Sephardic music originates in the musical traditions of the Jewish communities in medieval Spain. It is an expression of being Jewish, as well as individuals living in the Iberian Peninsula. The topic of Sephardic folk songs include entertainment, romance, spiritual and ceremonial songs. Upon their exclusion from Spain in 1492 and from Portugal in 1497, the Sephardim settled in Europe, North Africa, and the dominions of the Ottoman Empire, including modern-day Turkey and Greece. Music continues to play an important part in expressing the reverent spirit of the Jewish faith. The oldest chanting in the synagogue is rooted in the services held in the temple in Jerusalem. This sense of music derived from the oral tradition of the Jewish people of the Old Testament. While there was typically no punctuation, phrasing marks, and no division of sentences in the written scroll of the Torah, the traditional chant expresses meaningful phrasing, correct grammatical nuances, and fine shades of meaning. In the 7th century AD, this phrasing was put down into written form. Even in terms of the Torah prior to the 7th century, there was an element of oral tradition of the Jewish people passed on to succeeding generations. Apart from the Psalms, musical stories spoke to the biblical history of the Jewish people. Numerous tunes and chants remain in the synagogue to this present day. These old synagogue chants are uniformly of a simple melodic framework. They're suited to the congregation singing. You're going to hear plain chant. You're not going to hear polyphony or modern harmony. However, this created kind of an exotic and ancient tone. This is the cultural background, both in terms of the exotic and Middle Eastern sound of this music. And this is a strong link between religion, culture, and the oral tradition kept alive the Jewishness of the Sephardim when they later expressed themselves in Ladino in the Iberian Peninsula. Despite the slavery of Egypt, the Assyrian and Babylonian captivities, conquests by the Greeks and later the Romans, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, the Jewish people were able to retain their national identity through their religion, their culture, their stories, and their music. When one considers the shifting fortunes of the Sephardim in Spain over the centuries, culminating in their expulsion, and ultimately the Inquisition, one can only marvel at the strength of character of the Sephardim as they retain their identity in the face of oppression. It is astounding that even with the expulsion of the Sephardim from Spain in 1492, the Sephardic identity, religion, and culture survived without a specific homeland until the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. The Sephardim is a reference to the Jewish community who lived in Spain or Portugal, who were ultimately forced to leave after the expulsion in Spain in 1492 and Portugal in 1497. Sephardim comes from the Hebrew word for Spain, Sepharad, said to be an uncertain location of biblical origin, which was later identified by the Jewish community in the Iberian Peninsula as the province of Roman Hispania. It is said that the Jews have lived in Spain since the era of Solomon. However, very little information can be found on a Jewish population in Spain until the beginning of the 1st century. The only evidence supporting this proposition is a midrash, or folk tale of the Jewish people. When Nebuchadnezzar captured Judah and took the Jews in slavery, one of his vassals, allegedly from Hispanus, was given a certain portion of the slaves. Of these slaves came numerous descendants from the house of David, including Kohanim, the high priest of Israel. These captives had initially been transported in chains as slaves to what is now the province of Andalucía. However, these captives were promptly freed by their brethren who paid their bond. As such, there were Jews prior to this in Hispania. These redeemed bond slaves were then resettled to Sevilla and Lucena, and many great families took up prominent roles in these cities. After the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, some 80,000 Jews were transported to Spain in chains during the conquest and reconquest of Palestine. Within days of arriving in Spain, these prisoners were likewise redeemed from bondage by their brethren. According to the tenets of Judaic law, the freeing of the enslaved Jews was regarded as one of the greatest mtzvot, or virtues, in the cultural milieu of the Jewish people. In view of the custom, the Roman governor of Spain requested that only those Jews of the most aristocratic background should be settled in his province. Many great families, including Ibn Abdullah and his descendants of the tribe of Judah, established new roots in Spain. The Jews settled throughout Spain, growing in numbers and contributing to the cultural and economic growth of the region. They enjoyed relative freedom and prosperity. They erected fortified cities known as the Cities of the Jews. Granada, called La Ciudad de los Judíos, Córdoba, Toledo, Saragossa, Tarragon. In terms of the first Christian period, there was no apparent hostilities between Jews and Christians. In 305 AD, the Council of Toledo passed an edict forbidding Jews from blessing the crops of non-Jews and prohibiting Jews and non-Jews from eating together. In 313 AD, at the Council of Elvira, near Granada, the Catholic bishops determined that peaceful interaction with the Jews imperiled the advancement of God's holy church. The council promulgated a definite separation between the two faiths. Failure to adhere to this edict would result in both secular and non-secular punishments. Intermarriage was prohibited, and in those cases with mixed marriages resulting in offspring, the church demanded that the children would be baptized and raised Catholic. In 409, the Visigoths conquered Spain. This resulted in the diminishment of the church's authority, as the Visigoths were Arian and not Christians. In 587, however, King Recared, the Visigoth king of Spain, converted to Roman Catholicism and made it the state religion. Subsequently, the church was to exert powerful influence on all aspects of social life. In 589, a canon was passed forbidding the marriage between Christians and Jews, and in 612, the Council of Gondomar of Toledo ordered that all Jews submit to baptism within the year, and in 638, that only Catholics should live in Spain. This is the first expulsion of the Jews from Spain. The Exodus commenced, as Jews were compelled to seek safety abroad, and those who remained were obliged to sign an oath of perpetual allegiance to the Church. Many of the persecuted found refuge in the Muslim world. However, it is said that in their hearts Spain remained their home. It has been rumored that the exiled encouraged the Caliphate to invade Spain in hope of returning to their home, but there appears to be no scholarly support. In fact, it probably sounds like Catholic propaganda. In 710, Tariq set sail from Morocco to Spain on borrowed merchant ships. He was in command of some 7,000 Berber tribesmen. This small expedition landed on the southern tip of Spain at the foot of a mountain we know as Gibraltar. There, he built a stronghold. Roderick, or Rodrigo, crowned king of all Goths, underestimated the small Moorish force and dispatched his nephew Sancho with a force superior in numbers. However, Sancho's army suffered a devastating defeat at the hands of the Arabs, and Sancho himself fell in combat. Roderick himself led an army of allegedly some 100,000 men, However, he too was defeated. In defeat, other Visigoth nobles assassinated their weakened king. The Moors dealt the final blow to the Visigoths in the Battle of Xeres de la Frontera on July 19, 711. The situation for the Sephardim improved with the Muslim conquest of Spain. As Spain gradually fell under the rule of Muslim Moors, the Moors were welcomed everywhere by the Jews as deliverers and benefactors. The Moors entrusted administration of municipalities to the Jews due to the fact that the entire Arab force was comprised of warrior tribesmen who were ill-equipped in administration and in management of civic affairs. Both Muslims and Jews built a civilization based in Cordoba, known as Al-Andalus, which was more advanced than any civilization in Europe at that time. Jews were able to coexist peacefully with their neighbors, as were Christians. However, they were still treated as dhimmis, or non-Muslims living in a region controlled by the Muslims. However, as both Christians and Jews were people of the book, that is, people of the Bible, they were allowed to practice their religion of choice under Islamic law. Jews did not have complete autonomy, however. They had to pay a special tax referred to as the jizya, that is, material proof of the non-Muslims' acceptance of the subjection to the state and its laws. In return, non-Muslims were permitted to freely practice their faith, enjoy a measure of communal autonomy, and be entitled to the Muslim state's protection. The age of Muslim rule in Spain between the 8th and 11th century was considered the golden age for the Sephardim. Jewish intellectual and spiritual life flourished, and many Jews served in Arab Spanish courts. Jewish economic expansion was unparalleled. In Toledo, Jews were involved in translating Arabic texts to the Romance languages, as well as translating Greek and Hebrew texts into Arabic. Jews also contributed to the sciences, poetry, and philosophy. A number of well-known Jewish physicians practiced during this period, and many scientists and artists made this the golden age. Despite the respected accord by the Muslim rulers, Jews lived separately in al-Hamas, or Jewish quarters. They were given administrative control over their communities and managed their own communal affairs. Jews had their own court system, known as the Bet Din. Rabbis served as judges and rendered both religious and civil legal opinions. Islamic culture also influenced the Jews. Muslim and Jewish customs and practices became intertwined. For example, Arabic was used for prayers rather than Hebrew or Spanish. Before entering the synagogue, Jews washed their hands and feet, which is a practice done before the Moors entered a mosque. Arab melodies were used for Jewish songs, and Jews wore the clothing style of their Moorish neighbors, although they were still not allowed to wear silk or furs. The Qayyamid dynasty ruled Spain for some 35 years. One of the most influential of the caliphs was Suleiman, who ruled for only 2 years when he died of plague in 717. During the reign of Caliph Abdul Rahman, Moorish culture flourished, and an epoch of enlightenment capped almost 300 years, the golden age of the Sephardim, where the Jews flourished. Jews lived peacefully in Al-Andalus for over 300 years, but the golden age of the Jews in Muslim Spain declined when the Almoravids gained power in 1055 and continued to deteriorate after the Almohads came to power in 1147. Even so, Sephardic Jews continued to work as moneylenders, jewelers, cobblers, tailors, and tanners. However, they were typically distinguished by their clothing, and they were still required to live in the Jewish quarters of the city. The Almoravid were an Arabic confederation of Berber tribes. Marked by religious zeal and military enterprise, they built an empire in northwestern Africa and Muslim Spain in the 11th and 12th centuries. These Saharan Berbers were inspired to improve their knowledge of Islamic doctrine and spread the Muslim faith. They established a capital at Marrakesh in 1062. Yusuf assumed the title Commander of all Muslims, but still paid homage to the Caliph in Baghdad, who was Commander of the Faithful. Yusuf moved into Spain in 1085, as the old Caliphate territories of Cordoba were falling before the Christians. Toledo was taken by Alfonso VI of Castile and Leon. At the Battle of Al-Zalaqua, near Badajoz, in 1086, Yusuf halted an advance by the Castilians, but they never regained Toledo. The Almohads were a Berber Muslim dynasty that ruled Morocco and Spain in the 12th and 13th centuries. The Almohads were a puritanical sect founded by Ibn Tubart, who sought to purify Islam and oust the Almoravids. His successors succeeded in conquering Morocco and Muslim Spain, and by 1174, the Almohads had completely displaced the Almoravids. In time, the Almohads lost some of their first purifying zeal. Yaqub had a rich court and was a patron of the Averroes, that is, the philosophers that followed the philosophy of Averroes. Yaqub defeated Alfonso VIII of Castile in the Battle of Alcarlos. In 1212, the Almohad army was defeated, and the Almohad power in Spain was destroyed by the victory of the Spanish and Portuguese at Navas de Tolosa. When Tariq and his 17,000 Berber tribesmen pushed through Spain, they were able to take all of Spain with the exception of the northernmost provinces that were protected by the mountains. They pushed all the way past the Pyrenees and into France. However, at the Battle of Tours, they were pushed back by Charles Martel. Eventually, the Christian factions came together, and piece by piece, they were able to retake Spain. This is called a reconquista, or the Christian reconquest of Spain. Now, when the Christians took Toledo in 1098, the Jews in Christian Spain initially prospered, while those Jews in Muslim Spain suffered a decline in status under the Almohad dynasty. Initially, both Jews and Muslims were involved in the cultural, economic, intellectual, financial, and political life of Christian Spain. But by the mid-13th century, the Christians controlled most of Spain and increasingly forced Jews to convert to Christianity. Those Jews who converted became known as Aranos, or New Christians. La Reconquista effectively spelled the end of the Sephardim in Spain. Many Marranos were also crypto-Jews because they taught their children and practiced their religion in secret. During this period, Jews were forced to participate in religious ceremonies with Christian counterparts. However, an untold number secretly held on to their culture and their faith. In 1391, anti-Jewish riots broke out in several Spanish cities. The Spanish Inquisition tortured and killed Marranos suspected of being crypto-Jews during the 15th century. The Grand Inquisitor of Spain, Father Tomás de Torquemada, determined that if these crypto-Jews and those who openly practiced their religion remained in Spain, then they would influence the new converts to Christianity. After the capture of Granada from Muslim forces, Torquemada convinced King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella that the Jewish community was expendable. In 1492, Isabella and Ferdinand commanded that all Jews who refused to convert to Christianity should be expelled. Spanish Jews were given 4 months to leave Spain and were forced to sell their houses, property and businesses at rock-bottom prices. It's estimated that 100,000 Jews left Spain at this time. The expulsion from Spain is commemorated every year by all Jews on the holiday of Tisha B'Av. The following quotation is from the oral literature of the Sephardic Jews by Professor Samuel G. Armistead of UC Davis, quoting A History of the Jews in Christian Spain. The edict by which all Jews were exiled from Castile and Aragon was signed by the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella on March 31, 1492. But we should not think of this banishment, radical and catastrophic as it surely was, as an altogether sudden, definitive occurrence. It was, in a certain sense, a quite gradual, centuries-long process. Some Jews, when threatened by the alternative of exile, were to accept Christianity, and some were to become sincere converts, but many other conversos who remained in Spain were to practice in secret their ancestral religion for centuries after 1492. After 1492, many Spanish Jews settled in Portugal, which allowed the practice of Judaism. However, in 1497, Portugal also expelled its Jews when King Manuel of Portugal agreed to marry the daughter of Spain's monarchs. One of the conditions for the marriage was the expulsion of Portugal's Jewish community. Very few Jews were exiled from Portugal as the rest converted under duress to Christianity. The first Sephardi diaspora, that is, the exiled Sephardic communities from Spain and Portugal. A large number of Jews settled in North Africa and in the Ottoman Empire, especially Turkey and Greece. Spanish exiles brought with them a unique culture and language, Ladino, and their traditions. Many of these immigrants continued to speak Ladino until the 20th century. Large Sephardic communities were founded in Venice, Leghorn in Italy, London in England, Bordeaux and Bayonne in France, and Hamburg, Germany. These immigrants spoke Portuguese and Spanish, and many adapted mainstream Western European culture. Successful business enterprises were started by these Sephardim, and their trade networks became famous worldwide. Throughout the medieval period in Europe, the Sephardic Jews were treated as elites among Jews. Many times they had a secular education and often had great wealth. In the 18th century, the Sephardic Jews who lived in the cosmopolitan centers of London and Amsterdam tended to discriminate against non-Sephardic Jews. Sephardic Jews would typically force other Jews to sit separately from the rest of the congregation in their synagogues. For hundreds of years in Islamic lands, Sephardic Jews lived as dhimmis in relative peace in North Africa and in the Ottoman Empire. While considered second-class citizens, they were free to practice their own religion and participate in commerce, just as they had during the golden era of Al-Andalus. The Sephardic upper class in the Ottoman Empire were employed as translators. Ladino, that is, Judeo-Spanish, is the spoken and written language of the Sephardim. Ladino, however, did not become a specifically Jewish language until after the expulsion from Spain in 1492. It was merely the language of their province. It is also known as Judesmo and other such names. When expelled from Spain and Portugal, the Sephardim continued to speak Ladino in the communities and countries to which they immigrated. Ladino therefore reflects the grammar and vocabulary of 14th and 15th century Spain. However, for those who lost contact with Spain, their Ladino language was not changed by developments in Spanish Castilian. In these instances, Ladino diverged from mainstream Castilian. Those Jewish Ladino speakers in Western Europe who were in constant contact with Spain conformed their Ladino to the Castilian Spanish of the time. However, the Sephardic communities of the Ottoman Empire and North Africa not only retained the older forms of Spanish, they also borrowed from Hebrew, Arabic, Greek, Turkish, and French. The vocabulary of Ladino includes hundreds of archaic Spanish words which have disappeared from modern-day Spanish, and also includes many words from different languages that have supplanted the original Spanish from the various places Ladino-speaking Jews settled. Ladino was written in the Hebrew alphabet, in Rashi script, or in Solitro, a cursive script. It was only in the 20th century that Ladino was ever written using the Latin alphabet. At various times, Ladino has been spoken in North Africa, Egypt, Greece, Turkey, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, France, the United States, Latin America, and Israel, with about 200,000 Ladino speakers presently. You will now hear examples of Sephardic music. This music will be religious in nature, biblical, romantic, and sometimes very, very sad. These were a very passionate and beautiful people. Now, if this music you're about to hear sounds Middle Eastern, it's because the Jewish people originated in the Middle East. Remember, these are the people of the Old Testament. And yet, if this music sounds Spanish, that's because the Sephardim were Spanish.
El rey de Francia recién tenía la una labraba, la otra cosía. La más chica de ellas, bastidor hacía, labrando, labrando. Sueño le caía. Su madre que la había Arba la quería, no mahar me madre. Ni mahar varía. Un sueño me soñaba, quería alegría, sueño vos soñaba. Yo volo saltaría. Me abrí a la puerta y de la luna entera me abrí a la ventana. Y de la estrella Diana. Me abrí al pozo y de un pilar d'oro con 3 pajaricos picando el oro. La luna entera es la tu suegra, la estrella Diana. Es la tu cuñada. Los 3 pajaricos son tus cuñadicos y el pilar d'oro. El hijo del rey tu novio.
Triste está el rey David, triste está de corazón por desechar las sus ansias. Subióse al mirador. Vini aquí los mis nietos, huérfanicos nuevos sos, quitavos armas de oro, de plata, vestivos vos, que vos adelante miraron, alba shakerola, alba shakerola, alba shakerola, alba shakerola. Moses salió de Israel, haciendo del reparo, fuese derecho Midian, entróse con Yitro. Dio le asi por la furia, porque era gente de Dios. Mose pasaba el ganando que su suegro entregó. Y al pasando sogranado al monte de llegó, asentóse en una piedra, esperando ver a Dios. Hoy una ataques están cosiendo. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos amazar. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos amazar. Purim, 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 l'anno, pesa, pesa a la mano. La nonna está diciendo a los nietos, limpa el pueblo, cantones y los techos. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos amazar. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos amazar. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos amazar. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos amazar. Tu madre cuando te parió y te quitó al mundo, corazón ella no te dio para amar segundo. Corazón ella no te dio para amar segundo. Adiós, adiós querida, no quiero la vida, me la amargaste tú. Adiós, adiós querida, no quiero la vida, me la amargaste tú. Va, búscate otro amor. Va a otros puertos, aspira a otro ardor, que para mí sos muerta. Aspira a otro ardor, que para mí sos muerta. Adiós, corazón, linda de mi corazón. Tra la 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 la, tra la 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 la, linda de mi corazón, linda de mi corazón. Yo me enamoré de noche. Otra vez me enamoro. Tú no eres una mujer muy hermosa, lindo de mi corazón. Sea de Dios con sol. Si otra vez me enamoro, sea de Dios con sol. Tra la 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 la, tra la 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 la, sea de Dios con sol, sea de Dios con sol.